Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 314 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. This week, I'm introducing you to my Coaching Plus Zoom meeting, a chance to listen to my ramblings about all things beekeeping. It's the first part of our Zoom meeting where I talk about moving the bees to the heather and how successful our Thorn Beehives section rack has been. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. This week's podcast is sponsored in part by Modern Beekeeping, suppliers of general beekeeping equipment, including high-density polyhives. These include Paradise National hives, Swenty polyhives, and of course Honeypore hives, my particular favourite. More than this, Modern Beekeeping also supply traditional cedar and pine hives, a range of very effective bee feeds called Apimix and Apipasta, and a full range of all the must-have beekeeping equipment for every beekeeper. For all your beekeeping needs, contact Paul at Modern Beekeeping by visiting their website www.modernbeekeeping.co.uk. So here's the first 20 minutes or so of our Coaching Plus gathering. We normally get around 8 to 12 people, but because of the warm sunshine, barbecues, it's the weekend, it's a Saturday night, and of course the Olympics is on, there were only 4 of us in the meeting. But it was nice and informal and gave me a chance to explain where we're heading with our beekeeping. And before we kick off, my special thanks to Fran, Mike and Gordon for tagging along last night and putting up with my beekeeping ramblings. I'm going to blame the Olympics. I think that's probably what the issue is this evening. Everybody's watching the Olympics. I don't know what's on this evening.
No, it's not blue.
There must be some...
There was some taekwondo, which was brilliant. And I think we've just finished a diving event. Normally they have the cycling, don't they, in the evening?
Yeah, there's been some cycling on. Anyway, on with the beekeeping. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to be taking the bees up to the heather moors tomorrow night. So, in order to try and work smart, I'm going to use this meeting for my podcast tomorrow and just let people have a listen in to the meetings that we have once a month and let them know how it runs, what we chat about, and who knows, they might want to come along and join us. We do seem a little bit thin on the ground. We normally get around a dozen people, I suppose, eight people along for our chats, which is always nice, and it's always quite informal, I think, and there's never any pressure for people to have to contribute. So I do quite like that kind of laid-back atmosphere that we have. So I normally, each month, will kick off with a roundup of what's happened over the last month. And really, because we're now into August, everything's kind of slowing down, shutting down. We've had some really interesting honey coming in right at the end of what would normally be shut down for my summer nectar flow. So we've had colonies that we had on a oilseed rape crop that didn't really perform that brilliantly early on. We got some oilseed rape off them, but because of the workload, we ended up leaving these colonies on that particular crop. And the farmer had planted, and I think I've mentioned this before, the farmer had planted some clover in the field next to it, which they used to fix nitrogen in the soil. And so I think the roots develop these nitrogen nodules, and then they plow it in and it releases the nitrogen back into the soil. And actually, I've always found a clover crop not difficult to get, but it's just trying to find clover in any real quantity to be able to see it coming into the hives. But what's happened, and we've only got 5 or 6 colonies on this particular spot. But the weather conditions that we've had, I guess that wet weather that we had and then some fairly intense sunshine seems to have triggered the clover into flowering and producing nectar. And they've really, well, they've been putting away nectar for the last 3 weeks or so and have filled up quite a number of supers. So I can't wait to get back to those. But as we were saying earlier, we're just so busy that I haven't started to do any extracting yet. We've got some honey here at the unit in the warm room that needs to come out and start being extracted. But because we're taking the bees to heather, everything is focused on that at the moment. So you've probably seen the video of the borage crop that has now finished. I'm really pleased with what we've achieved down there, because we took earlier in the season, we sold quite a lot of nukes and actually split colonies, and we took those nukes to the borage with the intention of them building back up to full strength, not really looking to secure a huge crop. We took a couple of strong colonies down there with us, and those are the ones that we've used for the cut comb and the section racks. And I've got the section racks in the office here to show you. And the nukes have done really, really well. They've built up to full strength, and some of them have actually given us a crop of honey as well, such as borage, and the way it really just seems to be a tap of nectar that comes on. So that's been really good. We took the borage honey off last week, so that's come back to base. That's in the warm room, and it'll be okay in there for a week or so. I say warm room, but we haven't actually got a great deal of heat in there at the moment because it is quite warm at the moment. We've got some quite nice weather here, and it seems to be holding its own kind of temperature, so that will extract quite well. And looking at other colonies at the fishing lakes, where we kind of have, I mean, that's where we started our beekeeping, really, down at the fishing lakes. They've produced some really nice blackberry, and that's looking really good. And I think we've actually, whether the locals haven't been knocking back the Himalayan balsam, there's been quite a bit of Himalayan balsam coming in as well. So we've had this boost to the crop right at the end that has really started to fill up some of those supers that didn't look very full just 10 days or so ago. It looked as if the season at the fishing lakes was going to end fairly poorly, but actually we've now got quite a number of supers to come off, and some of those colonies are actually going to the heather as well. So I've been messing around with those all day long, trying to get them ready to take those up to the heather. When I say messing around with them, we want to make sure that we're not taking any honey up to the heather as we did last year, several kilos on top of each colony that should have come off and didn't. So I've spent most of today, putting clearer boards on, adding supers that we hope the bees will fill with heather honey, and clipping them all up and getting them ready to take tomorrow night. So that's Sunday evening. We'll go back over and start shutting them down, probably just as it's starting to get dark, around 8:30, 9 o'clock now, which is, nights are starting to draw in. And then we obviously have delayed this move to the heather honey because of the weather. It's been fairly miserable where we're taking the bees, according to the gamekeeper up there. So I really didn't want to take really strong colonies and have them confined in their hives. I really want them to have a little bit of half decent weather so they can get out and at least start foraging before the weather deteriorates again, which it looks as if it's probably going to over the next fortnight. So we delayed moving the bees last week, and a few days before that, we did the swapping out of supers, putting on supers for the heather honey, and preparing them ready to go last weekend. But obviously that didn't happen. We went over this week just to make sure that we'd got everything organised. And wouldn't you just know it, they've filled supers with honey again. So I've now got probably 7 colonies over there that have at least one full super of honey, if not one full super of honey and half a super with cut comb. We'd put frames in with thin foundation for cut comb off the heather, but the bees have drawn that out and are filling it with whatever it is they've found locally. They've got a nectar flow from somewhere, and I don't really understand until we get it under the microscope exactly what it is that they've got. So I think tomorrow I'm going to dash over there again, and I've got some more boxes ready. We've got our section racks that have been very successful on the borage that I want to try on the heather. And I've also got the Ross rounds again to try this year with a slight modification that I hope might help get more of them drawn and filled and hopefully in some kind of marketable condition, really. So that's the job for tomorrow. And that's why I'm hoping that we can let everybody listen to this as the podcast as well, because I'm not going to have time in the morning to spend a couple of hours, 3 or 4 hours doing the podcast. So hence our little meeting this evening is going to go out on the podcast, and I hope that you're okay with that. The process of taking the bees to the heather is finally happening. We've only got 18 colonies that we're going to take, which I guess I'd like to have taken maybe 24, but there's no point taking average colonies. They all need to be really strong in order to benefit from what forage and nectar flow hopefully there is in a very short space of time. That's something that I need to really focus on for tomorrow. And they'll probably only be up there for 3 weeks, and then we'll bring them back again. I don't think it's going to be a very long season up there at all. Immediately after that, we'll be kind of winding everything down and getting into the honey room for extracting and really just looking at getting these bees settled down for the autumn and winter. We've made lots of splits. I was saying to Fran earlier, before we hit the record button, that we're producing nukes for sale for next year. And a lot of those splits have now been made from colonies that were on the borage and some locally, and those have had new queens introduced in some cases. So we're using a couple of different methods with queen introduction this year because I'm all over the place at the moment and time has been so precious that we haven't been able to make our splits when we wanted to. And so some have literally been split a day or two before the new queens arrived. So those splits, I've gone back to my old method of putting the queen in the cage with the tab still in place. And I'm going to go back in probably on Wednesday and check for any queen cells and see if they've produced any queen cells, knock those down, and then hopefully we can release the queen into the colony and everything will be fine. I did have a message from somebody asking whether it was too late to do splits and shook swarms and that kind of thing. I think it really depends where you are in the country as to what the weather is like and whether or not you're going to be able to manage. Certainly shook swarms, it's getting very late. We've done a couple of shook swarms from full-size colonies into 6-frame nukes. And I think that works quite well at the moment. But as this month progresses, so I think you're on a very sticky wicket as to whether the bees are going to be able to draw that comb and the queen is going to be able to lay sufficient brood in order to support that colony going through the winter. It's not what happens so much in September and October as to what happens in December and January. So if they don't reach a kind of critical mass prior to that winter shutdown, they might seem okay, but the number of bees will dwindle as you have winter losses within that colony. So as the adult bees start to die out, and then they hit a critical point where the colony size is so small that they can't actually keep themselves warm enough and will perish. I would say if people are thinking of doing splits, get them done as quickly as possible now. If you're in a warmer part of the country, I guess further up north, it's probably too late for doing too many splits. I guess the element of jeopardy increases dramatically the further north you go and the longer you leave it. But we've actually split colonies in September, would you believe, and it's still worked okay. So I think if you give them enough bees, then that works okay. If you're trying to split them too much, then it can be problematic. So that's kind of where we've gone over the last month and what we're up to over the next week or two. Summer honey flow is finished. The blackberries have gone over. We've actually been picking blackberries. There's so many ready to pick. They're a bit sharp at the moment. I think they need some warm sunshine, but they're a little bit on the sharp side, but enjoyable nonetheless. And the other thing that I wanted to do, which isn't going to be good for the podcast, is I want to show you these sections. I'm going to shoot a video probably the back end of next week showing these sections properly. But I wanted to just go through this box with you, if you don't mind. That's me scraping the box across the table. There we go. So you can see we've got 28 sections here. And I'm just going to take these spring-loaded clips out, which hold everything together and hopefully not make too much of a mess of it. We've got some brace comb that the bees have put in as well. So I'll just cut through that to loosen this end board, and then we can perhaps get into it and have a proper look. It seems that the bees put propolis absolutely everywhere. The boards just get propolis in every conceivable little section that they can get to. It's the other clip taken out. Let's move that away. And then that's the side panel that comes away. So you get these two extra panels, bits of cedar. Now, if I prise these apart, we might be able to see what we've got. It's a bit nerve-wracking because they seem to come away all in one line, so you get four at the same time. There we go.
How many sections to get in the whole box?
So this is a 28 section. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 across and 4 down. And let me turn this to the camera, and you can see somebody did ask if the back of the sections that I was showing was the same, because I didn't show it in the video, and they thought that one side was probably not completely drawn. But they're looking pretty good, I think.
That looks fantastic. Yeah.
The one thing that I would say they haven't done particularly well, if I'm being very critical, not that this is going into a honey show or anything, but they seem to leave that little gap all the way around the edge. So I don't quite know how to get round that, or if in fact really I do need to get round it. I'm going to open up a couple more to show you. So they have these plastic dividers in between them. These stop the bees from joining the face of each section to the one opposite. So they don't like the plastic, so they won't draw it out any further than a kind of a bee space away from it. So this one, actually, if I show you this one, has been drawn kind of a bit closer to, I don't know if you can see that, it's been drawn a little bit closer to the wooden edge at the top and the bottom. And then on the other side, they've kind of started to fill in around the edges. Whether that's because they literally ran out of room and decided they were going to just fill every available space, I don't know. But they're all exactly like this. I mean, I can pull a couple more out to show you, but they are all drawn to that kind of quality, which is really impressive. I've always been a bit wary of using these because I thought that they were a bit of a gimmick, and it obviously reduces the amount of honey that you get overall from a colony. I think there was a question or a comment saying that it's unfair to say the only reason that they've been drawn is because they're on the borage, but I picked a strong colony and I put them on the borage, which obviously is a very good nectar producing crop. But to be honest, that's what you should be doing if you're going to use these sections. You need to find somewhere that has a really strong nectar flow and have the strongest possible colonies that you can put together in order to maximize the actual quality of the sections that you're getting. I mean, these are pretty much all the way through. I won't pull any more out because that feels like I'm gloating, but it's been very, very successful. And the colony that they went on were very, very strong. We didn't put an extra super on, although they have produced another super of honey as well as this. So we've got, I guess these must weigh probably a pound each. So in a full section rack, we've probably got maybe 15 kilos, maybe not 15, between 12 and 15 kilos of honey, I guess. And I lifted some supers today that probably had 20 to 25 kilos of honey, just normal frames. And so you're obviously going to get less honey using these sections. The only thing that I am a bit disappointed about are the containers, and these are the only containers that I can get that these sections will fit into. And to be honest, I think they look really awful. I don't think that they're particularly modern or attractive for the product that we're putting in. And I'm just going to pop one in. And when you close it up, there's just a tiny little window on the front, which is fine. I mean, that looks superb through the window, but it's just a tiny little window. And really, I think a cut comb container, this is the plastic cut comb container that I use, and you can see absolutely everything that's in the container. And it would be lovely to have something like a clear plastic container that shows off all of that fabulous comb. And if anybody is listening to this on the podcast, I do apologize about my appalling descriptive abilities, but have a look at the video, go online and watch the video, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. And that was the first part of our Coaching Plus Zoom meeting from last night. I hope you enjoyed it. If you are interested in joining in with our Coaching Plus Zoom meetings, I host them once a month. You'd be very welcome to come along. They last for anything from an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how many people turn up and how many questions we have. And as I say, you'd be most welcome. But rather than have you listen to my witterings for another hour and a half or so, I thought I'd draw it to a close there. And we'll catch up next week. Don't forget to check out my website, www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and for my latest videos and podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks, and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.